No, no, no. Don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. We are not done yet, right? Because here's the situation that we're in. We're in a really serious situation. Because if you want to hold financial fraud accountable, and not only if you want to hold financial fraud accountable, but if you want to be able to find a way to protect yourself against exploitation based on numbers riggers, then you're going to have to figure out some way to understand that audits are not necessarily a bad thing, right? It's kind of like the IRS. IRS, paying taxes, audits, these things are not necessarily bad things, right? It's kind of like what Arthur Anderson was saying for all those years, for decades. He was saying to Congress, you guys, there's laws. You pass laws. There's things you're legally required to do as part of the congressional budget process. You just haven't been doing it. You haven't been doing it for decades. You haven't been doing it for decades. In the 70s, there were all these congressional hearings. Do you remember those congressional hearings? You remember that audit they had on the Alaska pipeline? You know, things like that were going on, right? And then, you know, the whole thing with the railroad happened, right? And then the Department of Energy, right? That happened. Okay. We've got a couple of years down the road, you know, Enron, 9/11, all the evidence destroyed along with the FBI office. And by the way, the FBI agent investigating all that stuff, right? Okay. All right. So now we are where we are. And it's really a pain in the ass because for the last 5 years, pretty much every audit that you see with any federal agency appears to be part of a serious crime spree, right? As if they commissioned the audit to be published at a certain time to basically flip completely illegal deals they already set up way back in the day, including deals that were connected to allegations of suicide, right? The original suiciders, right? You know, the guys that like somehow get a bullet in the back of the head with a shotgun, things like that. Right? Okay. So you're trying to look through audits and you're trying to figure out, well, what's really going on financially here? I mean, this may or may not make any sense, right? I mean, it does or it doesn't make sense. Okay. So let's keep it simple. You're offered a job. The job says that in the course of this amount of days, you're going to work this many hours. Okay. You understand that but by basic labor laws, there's certain rules or certain things that have to do with that. Okay. You understand the industry standard says that the medium income you can expect for that particular job is one thing, and they're offering you way less. And they're requiring you to make a lot more commitment in terms of time. And you're working around industrial facilities, and you're dealing with industrial technologies that are actually very taxing, not only on the body, but also require a certain kind of acuity in order to make sure that the actual construction is safe, because you're creating products that are going to be used in matters that could potentially present a public health situation or concern, or may even be a part of some sort of industrial infrastructure development that could potentially be a national security concern. I mean, some people do things like that. Like they get jobs where that's the kind of stuff that they're supposed to deal with. And they're supposed to get training, and they're supposed to get certification, and they're supposed to get workers' rights, and they're supposed to get insurance, and they're supposed to get some way to assure that if they get, you know, injured on the job, there's some way to take care of that. And they're supposed to get, you know, tax, and they're supposed to get Social Security, and they're supposed to actually presumably be able to go off the clock. Your time's done. You're not on the clock. Your time is your own. And there might be standards like around drug testing, right? And things like that. Things you got to do off the clock that don't impair your ability to perform on the clock. Okay. So you're thinking about this and you're like, okay, here's this job and it says in the course of 10 days, you're going to work 6 consecutive days at 12 hours a day, and then you're going to get 4 days off. And then you're going to work 6 consecutive days, 12 hours a day, and then you're going to get 4 days off. And this is the schedule. And you're like, wait a second. What sense does it make for this company to require people to work 12 hours a day when they're dealing with ultrasonic technologies? You have to actually put your hands on the actual ultrasonic technology. Your body has to deal with actually being a part of the inspection that's using this technology, right? Okay. So there's that. And then you got to do it 6 days in a row. Well, that's more than 5 days a week. It's more than 8 hours a day, more than 5 days a week. You work more than 8 hours a day, or you work more than 5 days a week, that's overtime. But they're not paying you overtime. They're paying you a flat rate, and you're supposed to feel like, well, but you get 4 days off. Okay, then you decide, okay, you know, I'm going to do something. I'm going to do a calculation. And I'm going to see how much money they save by giving people a shift where you work 12 hours a day, 6 days in a row, and then you get 4 days off. How much money they save? Have you ever done that? Has anybody ever actually done that? Has anybody given a period of time, let's say 3 months, which is a quarterly earnings statement, or 6 months, or a year, and you do the calculations, just, time labor, and see the differential. How much money do they save with a shift like that? They don't. They don't save any money. It actually costs them more to not pay overtime and to not respect labor laws around apportionment of time. So what is the advantage? You don't think it has to do with some sort of risk hedging, do you? To see how much they can get away with. Because every hour a day, over 8 hours you work, is time and a half they're not paying when they just pay you a regular wage. And that accrues. And every time you work 5 days consecutively, and then you work that 6th day, including a 12-hour shift on that 6th day, without making overtime for that day, that accrues. And so you're actually creating insurance for the operationalization of massive, massive crime in the course of participating in construction of industrial materials, up to and including industrial materials that are presumably used for infrastructure, up to and including energy infrastructure. So you take that job, and you do that job, and you make whatever that industrial item is, and then you allow for that industrial item with all of the time labor that was put into it. In addition to somehow finding a way to defy whatever the actual behavioral science components are of testing worker responses, to knowing that they're taking a job that's way below market rate, and also requiring them to work in violation of labor laws and other laws regarding workers' safety around industrial technologies related to infrastructure, with an understanding at some point you had to get qualifications and credentials that made you demonstrate you had awareness of certain laws regarding public safety, up to and including potentially exposure to efforts to try to engage you in acts of domestic terrorism involving sabotage of infrastructure and industrial facilities. Besides all of that, you need the job. You need the job, and it's there, and that's what they offered. So you take the job where you work 6 consecutive days at 12-hour shifts. And you take those 4 days off. Maybe you get, at some point you actually get a week off, right? Because they have that kind of a schedule. Let me ask you a question. At what point do you start concerning yourself with shares in the company? When do you become a stakeholder? When do you start considering what your actual return on your time labor investment is? Do you even want to be a shareholder in a company that is that horribly exploitative of its workforce? If you, as a matter of political principle, understand your infrastructure and the development of your infrastructure is going to be based on the time and labor contributions of people that are qualified professionals, creating things that are safe, and investing their technical expertise in the construction of materials that are then going to be used in the construction of infrastructure, including infrastructure that's going to be a part of public works, that are going to be public works upon which public financing is based, including public financing that's supposed to be available for, I don't know, disabled people, seniors and elders, children, pregnant mothers, or pregnant women. And you may or may not get into a position where, as part of your negotiations, you want to become a owner in the company. And in order to become an owner in the company, that means you're becoming an owner in a company that is that exploitative and is that unsafe with its product development and is connected to a network that does not vet their suppliers and does not apply appropriate standards when it comes to auditing, and is in a financial network that leverages every single worker that they're working with, that is covering up for the company doing that, on how much they can exploit their workers in an effort to cover up for what they're doing. How many years does it take to get to a market collapse? Now, can you get to that market collapse without being able to blame it on something that is supposed to be able to qualify for force majeure? Like a health pandemic? Right? See, the problem is I knew better. And you shouldn't be allowed to have a job like that unless you also know better. Right? But then it's like, well, who are we? I mean, I don't have the credentials to be an auditor at that level, right? Or do I? Why were they even promoting a job like that? Why did they even allow a job like that to exist? Why do they let people that work at these psychiatric centers, these inpatient psychiatric centers, work 6 consecutive days, 7 consecutive days, 12-hour shifts? Why do they do that? Why are they allowed to be considered employed or employable? Who determined that that was acceptable? Because it's not just a specific sector that has a specific kind of specialization or expertise. They started intentionally applying this pressure to demand more and more and more for less and less and less and less. And they made a societal ritual out of the circle jerk. The guy's an asshole. If he gets beat up, what am I going to say? I don't really know him that well. And then I kind of like that guy, but I don't know him really well. Besides, he's a friend of my boss. And so if he gets beat up, I'm not going to say anything and risk it. And then you get to, that's actually my friend, and I don't want him to get beat up, but if I say anything, and then they go to your wife or your husband, and then they go up to you. And then by the time they get to you, nobody's going to say anything when they get to you, even if they like you, right? That's where we are. And we're literally in a global gangbang right now. It's too late to bluff. It's too late. It's not a bluff anymore. So at what point does somebody actually do the reconciliation? When do you do the reconciliation? See, because these things were happening prior to COVID-19. And I have a feeling that what they did is they allowed for COVID-19 to be put into effect so they could try to backdate all the stock on all the stuff they did in order to lead up to COVID-19. And that's why we're not allowed to go to the library and find what we could be for. And that's why they changed the documents in the public purview. And that's why we're supposed to be conditioned to do things that don't make any rational or reasonable sense, including from a public health perspective. And that's why if we actually have qualifications and skills for the jobs, we can't get the jobs ourselves. If we actually write a piece of legislation, they're never going to vote for us. If we actually have certifications and, have a little bit of practical experience in doing some independent investigation, we're never going to get the job. Am I correct? Am I incorrect? Right? Is that why you can literally just use the FBI in order to, find kids in a daycare center that have a parent that's in the FBI in order to kick back to local law enforcement? You already got away with it with the military. And the military didn't say a fucking thing the entire time you were hooking it up. The military didn't say fucking shit about literally trafficking their own fucking kids, including for 25 fucking years, for corrupt politicians that don't have their back in any fucking way and are going to hang them out to dry and are going to throw them out as soon as they get the fucking chance after they get all the shit that they fucking hooked up and tested on the military. And why would they say anything about the FBI? Why are they going to say anything about public school teachers? Because that's where we're at now. You understand that, right? Now that's where we're at right now. Is that they took their little satanic ritual of completely destroying our ascension into selfhood, and all of the Jesuses are going to be crucified. And the thing is I've already been crucified, right? And if I don't join in the effort to crucify the rest of the other Jesuses, where do I end up? Right? This is what their infrastructure project's about. This is what they want. It doesn't matter if it's the Democrats or the Republicans. This is what they want their infrastructure to be about. For who? For who? They stripped down all of our expertise. They stripped down all of the possibilities they've been appropriating for this entire time. They put us trillions of dollars into debt. Did they just put us trillions of dollars into obligation so they can make it into one big contract with all of us parceled out with the branding for the different people that are going to be able to herd us around and occasionally slaughter a certain number of us, and then they're going to sell it off, auction it off? Yes, that's exactly what they did. So, the accounting's out. The truth of the matter is it's not very cost effective. And the only thing it really did was create a foundation for trying to justify a downgrading of things that are actually very important and that would be needed for actual safety and stability. But if you discount them and then you let them lapse, then when they get to the default, you can make insurance. And then you can defraud the insurance paradigm from the onset so that you can actually pre-program other people to take the hit for your crime spree, which is exactly what they've done since September 11th, right? And are we going to let them get away with it? I mean, we got in 4 days, it's going to be June 11th. We got one quarterly earnings statement time frame to keep them from delivering on their 20-year complete sellout of the entire fucking planet. Are any of you going to get over your fucking cowardice and fucking do something yet? Do you need more white supremacists? Do you need more white supremacists to yell and scream at you and dominate you into standing up for yourself?